Ashe, Ashe. Happy Sunday. Obrigada for being here. Aquaba, welcome. We hope you are doing well. Hope you are reaching or have already reached your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual health today. We're very happy to have you with us for this episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And today our topic is same family, same organization. Myself, Ahjamu, my daughter, Shukura, will be talking about what it is to be in a revolutionary organization together and to struggle over revolutionary ideology and principles and how that impacts our relationship as father-daughter. A lot of people have, in the movement, you notice over the years, a ton of people, they don't oftentimes have good relationships with their family members. A lot of people are estranged from their children, or, their children see the fact that they participate in the struggle as a negative thing. And so we want to talk about some of the things that we've tried, not that we're perfect, because we most certainly aren't, but that we've tried that have worked based on the approach that we've taken to life that we've gotten in large part because of the revolutionary organization that we belong to. So we're glad that you're here to join us. We give thanks and honor to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. We acknowledge our African ancestors, and we just want to ask you to pay special attention right now to what's happening in occupied Palestine, you all. These Zionist white supremacists are wiping out the people of Jenin, the town in occupied Palestine in the West Bank there, and they're causing undue trauma and destruction to the Palestinian people, something that happens every day over there. You'll never hear about it on the news here. They're too busy talking about one 80-year-old cracker and another 80-year-old cracker. But we are concerned with the masses of people on the planet Earth. So we want to make sure that peace and justice-loving people are paying attention to the suffering that the colonized people of the world continue to experience. So our thoughts and our revolutionary fervor and our commitment to waging this struggle in an uncompromising fashion, all of that goes to the Palestinian people, because when we win, they win. And when they win, we win. So we will move forward with our just who we are and what we're doing. And again, Our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, APRP. And the APRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass Pan-African political party that is based nowhere else except in Africa. That's our base. And our objective is Pan-Africanism. That's what we're fighting for. That's what we're organizing to achieve. And Pan-Africanism, correctly defined, is not just Black people getting together. It's not just us wearing African clothes. It is strictly the organization and the accomplishment of achieving one unified socialist Africa, one unified socialist Africa. That's our objective. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism is outlined in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. If you don't know that book, you should familiarize yourself with it. And Our Ancestors' Voices is, of course, sponsored each week by myself, Ahjamu, and my biological and ideological daughter, Shukura, who both of us are active organizers within the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And of course, again, that is the topic for today of how we manifest that in a reality of a capitalist system where oftentimes parents and children, even those that aren't even involved in organized struggle, like, have a really difficult time maintaining positive, healthy relationships. We feel like we have been able to do that. And we want to talk about what I would say is a large part of the reason why, which is the revolutionary principles and practices that we institutionalize every single day as organizers within the All African People's Revolutionary Party. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And so to get us started, I will turn it over to Shukura.
Thank you, kind sir. I appreciate that. Greetings, everyone. We hope you all are maintaining your best ideological, physical, spiritual well-being. We wanted to check in with you all and just kind of check in about some of our processes that we have been practicing as we have navigated these spaces under capitalism. And we all know how difficult that can be. So if you are able to, I know the PowerPoint has given us some issues here. Give us 1 second, you all. I had some different slides for my particular part. So we know that this is all a part of just being patient, but also understanding that we don't control these systems that we're using. And so because of it, we have to just kind of navigate through their time. But while we are getting the PowerPoint presentation up, I want to just start by explaining to you all that my first slide that I'm going to talk about, I just titled it Sounding Board. And I just gave some different examples of how my dad has been a sounding board for me as an organizer, but also as a person who's trying to figure out who they are under capitalism and how to deconstruct and unlearn colonialism and capitalist ways. It's been an ongoing process. And I know today's presentation is about the relationship that my dad and I have cultivated, but I would be remorsed, and also I wouldn't be collectivist and socialist if I didn't acknowledge my village, my grandparents, my ancestors, and also my mother, and playing a part in making me become the person I am. So I will just start off by saying that the very first bullet that I have just talks about how there's always been a space for conversation, and it really doesn't matter what the conversation is, because under capitalism, it's always something dehumanizing anyway. And so I give this example about my dad being a sounding board because no matter what the conversation is, he's always made himself available for me. That wasn't just when I was a child. It wasn't just when I was an adolescent. It wasn't just when I was a preteen. And it was not just when I was in my undergraduate years as a college student. I have continued to use him as a sounding board for 36 years. And as long as the ancestors and the universe and he and I are willing, I will continue to navigate that, because I think that he has been instrumental tremendously in helping me to make the kind of decisions that I need to make. So I know from my upbringing that there is nothing today that I cannot talk to my dad about. We are extremely close, and I try to practice complete honesty with him so that he can have all the information to listen to or help me. As a child, if there was a teachable moment, he would use that to educate me. So whether it was on sexual education or interpersonal relationships, he always took those opportunities to use those moments to teach me a lesson. Now, as an adult, those foundations have been laid. So I am privileged. And I'm going to use that word a lot tonight, because I understand that there's some folks that maybe are aiming to have a relationship like this with their loved ones, and there's simply too many barriers in the way. So I understand my privilege of being able to do that, because that has allowed me to have this kind of access and foundation. Just a quick example of what I mean by using these teachable moments. You know, I was very young, but I wanted to watch the Baby Boy movie with Tyrese Gibson and Snoop Dogg and Taraji P. Henson. And I remembered, my dad was very intentional with what kind of movies I was exposed to, what kind of media. So certain songs on the radio, certain songs that were playing and being revealed as singles. He was very institutional, but also very intentional, with what I was exposed to. And if I was exposed to something, then he wanted to make sure there was a deep analysis that took place so that I could understand what the media content was about. So for example, Baby Boy, I really wanted to see that movie. But of course, as a young child, I'm not going to understand all the really heavy concepts that take place in that film. And so as an adult woman, I don't know how I did it as a child, but as a child, he literally would let a scene play and then pause it and ask me some questions to see if I understood. And he didn't just do do you understand? And then the student says yes, and then you keep going when really they don't understand, but they're too shy to say that they don't understand. He would literally ask me to explain why Ving Rhames had said what he said to Tyrese, or why Tyrese had said what he said to the character that played his mother, or how he spoke to Taraji, and all these different things that took place. And so as complicated and as complex as those different themes were throughout that movie, I remembered being exposed to it, and even up to the intimate scenes where intimacy took place. We had conversations around that and what that looked like. I would also argue that just as a young child, but also as an adult, I still have so much to learn when it comes to understanding systems of oppression and the harm that they can manifest into. My dad often gives me clarity and helps me unpack things when I am enduring them. And so I can give you another example about how many marginalized people who are non-males, but even some males, have to unfortunately go through sexual harassment situations. And some of us are supported and brave enough to take charge and to do something about it, where a lot of us don't have the support or the capabilities to do anything at all. I was in the first part where I was privileged and supported enough to do something, but I was still scared. And this happened as an undergraduate student. And I remembered feeling guilty, because that's what oppression does to a person who is the victim, is it makes them feel like the oppressor. And so I remember taking responsibility and still having some of that guilt today, that I had put myself in that situation and caused this really grown and gross man to behave in a very inappropriate way around me. And I remembered saying to my dad, well, if I had just not worn those particular dress pants, because I remember they were really tight, and I'm really trying not to get emotional when I say this, and I'll never forget, he said, Shukura, it doesn't matter how tight your pants are. He should have enough common sense and respect and control for his organs, if you understand what I'm saying, because I know children are listening to this broadcast, and he should have enough control to still navigate through that. Even if you are wearing no clothes at all, he should still be able to control himself. And I don't think marginalized people really get to hear that approach very much, especially because we are more often likely to be victimized. But as I just said, the system is so evil and intentional, it will find a way to flip that and make us feel like we are the problem, which is why I took responsibility and I said it was my fault that I wore those pants, because that's what society teaches us to do. That's what society teaches us to do. And I'm very privileged that my dad knew automatically to deflect and to reverse that. I would also argue that as a socialist and a humanist, I'm still working on balancing. And sometimes my love for humanity causes me to struggle with standing up for myself when people manipulate me. My dad cares enough about me to pay attention to my characteristics and therefore remind me to show myself grace and compassion when I need it the most. I remember growing up, and I'm sure you remember this example too, Daddy. I mean, you might remember all of these, but specifically this one. Whenever we would go out as a family in a public space, specifically a space that was on a public street, the sidewalks would always be a challenge for me, because as I said, I am a socialist and a humanist, right? And I don't know how to put my needs ahead of other people. I really struggle with that. And so I would literally walk on the sidewalk, and if people were walking towards me, I would step out into the street, because I felt like I was an inconvenience for them, for lack of a better term. And I still struggle with that today. Today, you all, I still struggle with that, because I'm so worried that I'm either going to be a humanitarian or be a capitalist. And I don't know how to be in the balance of that and just stand up for myself and not allow people to take advantage of me, but also still practice what humanist, collectivist, socialist principles, what those look like. And so for me, it's either be all for the people and unfortunately work on balancing to get more respect in the long run, versus the other way around. So that's a life goal that I have. But I remember doing that often. And finally, my dad said, why are you doing that? And I said, I don't know. I just want to be nice and be thoughtful. And he said, they're not being nice or thoughtful to you. They're just walking past you as you walk in the street and almost get hit by all these cars. And so then I would start walking, and I would still try to not move out of these people's way, but I would still do it because it's instinctive, I guess. And then he would grab my shoulders and not let me walk in the street. And so I think that, there's different approaches, right? Like first he verbally said, Shukura, don't walk in the street. Or he verbally said, you don't need to move out their way. Or he verbally said, try not to move out their way. Try to make them move out your way. He tried verbally, but that wasn't effective. And if you are a parent who understands that your child learns in different ways, as my parents do, then they also understood we got to try different approaches. And so we tried the verbal approach, that didn't work. So then we tried the physical approach where he put his hands on my shoulders. And so, yeah, I got the message then and I stopped moving. Now today, I don't move in the street anymore. Today, I try to pace the scene and see what's going on. And if people are cognizant enough of me, then I can be cognizant enough of them. But if they're not, then I put on my big girl stuff and I just navigate through it. And I do the best I can to stay safe while also expecting respect and by giving respect in the same. I would also argue that, my dad has demonstrated for me daily as a child and as an adult that even in the company we keep, he practices socialism even with the companies that he keeps, and that has influenced me in a dramatic way. Normalizing socialism around me and raising me with socialist values exposes me to the socialist countries and other socialist practices, even in capitalist America. So having conversations where I was able to learn and deep detail about different comrades who had not only celebrated socialism, but had practiced it daily. So of course, the names at this point. We're talking about Kwame Nkrumah, we're talking about Kwame Ture, we're talking about Assata Shakur, we're talking about different Black Panthers who are still living to this day, who have been very vocal and advocating for a more socialist way of life, understanding all that the Black Panthers did and understanding the socialist programs that they brought, especially from a health standpoint, really giving birth to me understanding why health was so important and why the Panthers understood that, especially because a lot of our people had accessibility issues, but the Panther Party made all of those accessibility issues go away by bringing those sickle cell programs to those communities and whatnot. I would also argue that having these conversations influenced me to start wanting to learn more. So we talked in great detail about Assata Shakur. We also talked in great detail about Marilyn Buck. And from there, as a young child, that's why I picked up Assata's autobiography. Now, as a child, I didn't really understand it as well as I did later in my life where I read it again. But the point I'm making to you is I needed to first learn about this person, which is where the Black Panther conversations came from. And then from there, we started having more conversations about Assata and other organizations she was a part of. And from there, we had conversations about why she chose to go to Cuba, why she had to leave the US because the US falsely accused her. And from there, it became this idea where I want to learn more about her. Oh, she wrote a book? Well, I can read a book. I can definitely read it. And I really enjoyed reading it so much that I read it again because I wanted to understand more about her perspective and where she was coming from. As I continue to go through this slide, I think it's important that I acknowledge that I reached out to my dad way too much for organizational guidance, but yet he continues to be available and answer questions as they arise. It helps me when I share things with him because he often has experienced something that I am dealing with, and then he can assist me in ways that he's navigated through something. If he does not have the experience, then he can usually use his wealth of knowledge to still give me a calculated opinion on how he will deal with something. And so I would give the example of this local organization that I'm involved with. We have an annual baby shower that we offer to the community free of charge. And we ask our board members to provide items such as stroller car seat combos. We offer food at this event, and it's probably a 2.5 hour event where there are games, there are vendors, there's a health fair, and of course we're raffling off prizes to families who are expecting, have already had their children, or know someone who is pregnant currently. And this is something we do annually, specifically targeting our African families, because we understand that a lot of us can't even afford a car. So how would we be able to afford a car seat for a child? And again, these are the balances and the barriers that our people go through every single day. And so I was so frustrated at this one baby shower because the person came to the end of the table. I was serving drinks and they had already made their plate and came to the end of the table and said, that's all y'all got. And I was so annoyed. I was so annoyed because I'm not perfect and I have a long way to go when it comes to humility and whatnot. And so I said, yes, ma'am, that's it. And I wanted to say, and if you don't like it, you should have brought your own drink, but I didn't say that. I said, we have cranberry juice and we have water. Yes. I said, we're not funded by anyone. This is not a pro-capitalist event. I said, everything you see on this table comes from our pockets, out of our own hard-earned money. And the person just looked at me and went to sit down. And so I shared that story with my dad later, and he gave me a different perspective, of course, one that I had not considered. But he also laughed with me and he said that was inappropriate and that should have been handled differently. But I think if you handle it differently next time, and if you consider this, this, and this, then I think it might mean something else. And so as I continue to go through these, and I just want to wrap up quickly so we can start to move to the next slide, I would just say that there are some different ways that we also resist oppression. For example, me having an African name, I'm going to continue to stress that because that's one of the biggest ways that you can resist colonization and oppression. If you are a colonized person and you don't have a name that represents your true identity of your ancestors and who you are, then I think it's something that you might want to consider in terms of reevaluating how that has impacted you as a person, because you're internally accepting the oppressor's image of you, essentially, by having a name that is not one of your people. So for me, I think that's one of the best things that I can do, which is why my name to me is so unique. And this is also why it's so important to me that I keep it, even if I choose to get married to someone who may not have an African name. I understand the importance of keeping my full name, because it literally is who I am. And it makes me proud to understand that I am rattling and dismantling systems of oppression with this name, because every time someone says it or mispronounces it or tries to say it or tries not to say it, they still have to acknowledge that Africa is centered in that sentence by saying my name. And I think that's the best way that we can start to unlearn colonization, is by lifting up our colonized lands and allowing people to be uncomfortable learning more about cultures that have been erased and decentered. And so I think that that's a big piece. And I'll close with this. Just understanding that the revolutionary African personality, or as you see on the slide, rap, is one of the best ways that we as people in the All African People's Revolutionary Party literally try to practice every single day what our principles are. What is collectivism? What is humanism? What is egalitarianism? These are principles that we're trying to execute, not just in party work, not just in work study, not just on our ancestors' voices, but in every single moment of our lives. When we brush our teeth, when we go to sleep, when we take out the trash, when we wave to the sanitation workers in the morning, when we speak to the postal men or postal people or postal women. These are different opportunities where we still need to practice revolutionary African personalities. And my dad has done an incredible job of that. He's continued to show me collectivism, humanism, egalitarianism. These characteristics fit my dad to the T. He shows me every day how to be anti-capital. And in return, I show him those principles too. I try to teach those principles to my students, and I try to practice those principles with my students. And then I share the stories and the outcomes with my dad for his feedback or his analysis. I had a student last semester, next slide, please, who was not giving me the participation that I needed. And I wanted to make sure they understood what I was trying to teach in the lecture. And so I said, hey, so-and-so, do you have any thoughts? And they messaged me privately, no, and I would appreciate it if you didn't call on me anymore. And I was so irate, like belligerent. Whoa, I was so hot and upset. And so I called my dad on the break and I was like, can you believe this? Da, da, da. And he's like, yeah, but capitalism, your approach, and and just at the end of the day, that's not right. They shouldn't have talked to you like that. And would they have done it if? And I said, if it were a cis white man. And he said, absolutely. And I said, that's what I asked him. And so then it was then this other thing and all this stuff. But my point is just being able to express how to still try to show respect and responsibility in spaces where even you were being disrespected. Because I asked that student later if we could talk one-on-one, and I respectfully went off on them. And I said, you're paying all this money. My job is to make you a better person than when you came in here. You're making it really hard for me to do my job. Also, if you didn't want to participate, why'd you register for the class? And so just still continuing to have respectful conversations, but also letting them know, don't talk to me like that again. And so just having those different ways to stand up for myself. As we are on the next slide now, this one is titled Advice for those who can't see. And I just basically went into how, Mark, you're so funny. I just basically went into how I start off by talking about organizing. And so I seek his thoughts on challenges that I face. And I ask him his advice when I'm organizing with other people who specifically don't have a political education background. That has been my biggest challenge. So again, I would use the example locally of the organization I'm involved with here in Memphis. I have actually tried to incorporate a political education program into our service, and a lot of people didn't see the benefit. They didn't see the necessity. I tried to organize just reading my dad's book as a starter, and then discussing that, because obviously this book ties into maternal and child health outcomes. They didn't see the value in that, and so continuing to use my energy in that approach, yes, but also just really appreciating that I am in an organization that has that, and being able to bounce those ideas off of my dad has been really great, because it's really difficult when you're trying to organize with people who don't have a political education background and they're pro-capitalist, they just don't know it. That's really, really difficult. And so just trying to navigate those two things. I would also say, as I start to close, that, if I'm having school challenges, I can think of going to my dad, because he understands that academia is a bunch of BS and capitalism anyway. I gave him some examples of some different things I was going through, where professors had asked me to help with research and then publish things but not put my name on it, and just sharing those things with him, asking him for his feedback. I'm also very privileged that I am pursuing a doctorate degree, of course, but I'm privileged that he pursued not an undergrad, but also a master's degree. So even having the ability to be frustrated and to talk to him about graduate level stuff and how stupid the whole system is, and then him having similar experiences, even with his situation, even though he didn't go to the same school, even though he didn't go out of state like I did, still being able to have those very annoying and frustrating conversations. Our graduate study programs were very different for numerous reasons, but the biggest one I would say is that he had a high school kid when he was in grad school, and he was working full time. I am not doing those things, but we both still got pulled through the mud quite a bit, and we both still had to struggle and navigate through those different cases. And I would argue, for each time that I have tried to pursue not just a college degree, but just trying to finish something tough in my life, it's been really difficult for me. And he's always reminded me, well, you had that issue when you were 7, and you had that issue when you were 13. And when you were at your undergrad, you had that issue. And then when you got your master's, you weren't sure if you were going to do it, and you did it. And so just continuously reminding me, from a place of love, from a place of egalitarianism, that this system can't break us. And again, that's privilege, because I know everybody doesn't have that. But if you don't have that with your loved one, I would strongly encourage you to start thinking from a principled aspect how you can provide that kind of support. Because if you have a loved one going through something as rigorous as pursuing a degree in capitalism, that's more than a notion in terms of mental health, and in terms of them just having the space to do what they need to do. I would also argue that it's no different when it comes to my word challenges or my relationship hurdles. So again, just being able to talk to him, and also his background with laborers, his background with understanding labor rights. The work challenges I've faced, I've worked with people specifically in the South who have wanted me to work hours and then not wanted to pay me. And just being able to call him and say, I know this is not right, but I'm not really sure how I should navigate this, has been really, really helpful, because again, the privilege to be able to do that. I know everybody doesn't have those capabilities, but I also know that people just don't have people that are just willing to listen to them. And that's something that he also does, because it's very disrespectful, and it's a violation to want somebody to work and then exploit them and not want to pay them. And sometimes you just need to express that. And so I appreciate that. As I continue to wrap up so I can close, I would also argue, this is probably one of the most important pieces here, is that with the relationship hurdles, as an African cis woman, I really, all caps, appreciate having a father with an anti-patriarchal approach, who chooses to be in constant practice with challenging his own male privilege and persuasion of toxic masculinity. I am deeply privileged to have this, because those practices have influenced my perspective and outlook on dating. I experienced dating someone in 2017 and made it clear that I was anti-patriarchal, but I don't think the person really understood what that meant. As we progressed, more patriarchal reared its head regarding my clothing, as a matter of fact. And I remember telling him, I'm not going down with that, but he still expressed some really inappropriate things about the length of my shorts that I was wearing. And it angered me so much, because I felt dismissed and disrespected. I shared this with my dad, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. I said to him, and I quote, something is not right. I can't quite put my finger on it, but this angers me. And so I know it's not right, because I am a humanist, and I wouldn't just get angry out of nowhere. I have self-control, and I try to treat people with respect, but I do not feel respected right now, hence why I am angry. And so just being able to explain that to him, and he gave some great analogies. He said, this is literally the same thing as somebody trying to control him, calling them the M word. And he's not going to understand that because he lives under male privilege every single day. So you're either going to have to explain that to him and be patient, or you're going to have to figure out, is this enough data that you need to make the decision that you need to make, which may consider departing ways. And he literally said, you have the data. It's just up to you on what you choose to do with it. And so I just really appreciate that. I appreciate his ability to break down complex topics. I think that requires a lot of patience, and it requires a lot of parents and children to willing to be hands-on with stuff. When I was in high school, I took a economics class, and it was really a challenge for me because I really didn't understand what the teacher was talking about. And we were learning about industrialization. And so he literally took the lesson and then he started explaining it to me by giving me different examples from around the world. And then he made it more in person, and we got in the car and went to Walmart, and he pointed out the self-checkout machines. And that really gave me a lot of clarity from there. And so as I close, I'll just say that his definition of a collectivism has exercised time and time again. I remembered that when I was trying to get my driver's license, he used collectivism that night. And because I had my license and I was learning how to drive a stick, I went to my senior ball and I knew how to get there, no problem. But then I was scared to drive back because it was nighttime. I had never come back to the house from that direction before. Plus, it was a stick and I was still learning. And this is where collectivism really comes into play, y'all, because this man is already at his house. He's already in for the evening. And I called him and I was like, can you come help me get back? And he was like, are you sure you need me? And I was like, yes, very much so. And so he came out and got me. And I have other examples, but just for the sake of time, I'll leave it at that. I've had friends that have needed advice on purchasing cars and publishing books. And in both cases, I did not know how to help them, but I knew that he would know how to help them. And so I asked them if it was okay to bring him in on that conversation. And then I asked him, both parties said yes. And he was able to give advice to people he probably will never meet in his life. But it's not about that. It's about helping to advance someone by sharing what you have with them. It's not about being greedy and allowing it to go from there. And so just closing with the safety tips, you all know that we've talked about this time and time again, but this continues to be something that I'm very grateful for, especially because I live by myself right now. And I need to make sure that I have what it needs to take somebody out if they come in doing something they're not supposed to be doing up in here. And so just having these conversations, being able to talk to him, being able to practice with him in person, but also virtually has been really beneficial. And that's only because of his knowledge that he's chose to share with me. If I didn't have the knowledge to understand how to be safe, even with the weapons when we're training, then I'm not going to know how to use them appropriately. And so I know that there's so much more that I could say, but I want to be respectful of his time and give the floor back to him. But I would say all of this to say, really start to take some ideas away on how you want to navigate this. And if you're not really sure, it might help if you join an organization working for justice, because you can also learn some of those skills in that organization and apply it to your loved one. Ashe.
Ashe. Ashe, Ashe. Thank you, Shukura. I think that it's amazing, but everything that you said really sets up well. And I didn't have a chance to preview your portion, but it's amazing. We're always on the same page because it really sets up well where I wanted to take the remainder of this conversation. And I think for you all, everything that Shukura said, I think the first and most important thing is that I appreciate all the things she said about me, but none of that is because of me as an individual. None of that is a reflection of me and what I individually decided to do. I'm far from perfect. I make tremendous amount of errors. The example she gave of, and Shukura already knows this, of course, but the example she gave of the man who was inappropriate with her, you know, I talked to her, and the main thing I wanted to do was support her. And that's, I'll say something more about the support element of revolutionary ideology and practice in a moment. But at the same time, I'm looking at plane flights. I want to come down there without her knowledge and deal with this situation, because that's just who I am. But so I'm not perfect, you know. I mean, obviously that would have made the situation probably worse. But my point is that anybody can decide that they want to develop positive and productive relationships with the people that are in their lives. But I don't think that you can really do that in this backward capitalist system on an individual level. And I think so often that's the approach people try to take. Everyone tries to approach everything you're doing on an individualistic level. And you can just look around us and see clearly that that approach clearly is not working for us. And that's why for us, we say that the approach has to be based on revolutionary ideology and practice, a collective revolutionary ideology and practice. So for us in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, it's our Nkrumah's, Touréist, Cabralist principles that guide our action. The principles of Kwame Nkrumah, the principles of Sekou Touré, the principles of Amilcar Cabral, the principles of every African who has stood up and represented our dignity as a people. These are the values that guide us. So whatever I've done right, it's because of those principles. If I didn't have those principles, there's no way in hell I would understand how to do anything that even comes close to engaging in positive human behavior, because I did not come from that element of life. I came from an element of life where you either take or you get took. And so I knew how to do that. But what the revolutionary principles have enabled me to do is learn how to respect humanity and to dedicate my life to living a life of respect for humanity. Not perfect, but committed to every day struggling to do that. And the reason why that's effective is because I have comrades all over the world who are doing the same thing. And this is why organization is so important. And while you'll never be able to match that on an individual level, you'll never be able to do that. So I can't take any credit for anything, because whatever I do, it's a reflection of the struggle of the masses of African people everywhere, nothing else. So that's just an important point to kick off the points I want to make, because whether I believe this and you probably don't believe it, I don't give a damn if you don't believe it, but I believe, because I believe in collectivism, because I believe in humanism, these are principles that we have under our Nkrumah's, Touréist, Cabralist ideology. I know that even if I didn't exist and there was another person here in Shukura's life who adopted the same principles and approached them with the seriousness that I've tried to approach them with, the result would more or less be the same. I believe that. I know that's way too heavy for a lot of us, but I believe that because I believe in collective humanity. I'm not an individualist. I don't believe in that. I don't think that that is realistic, especially for an oppressed, colonized people. It makes absolutely no sense to me. Yet, day in, day out, we constantly try to individualize our lives and our struggle. And that's why we have the challenges that we have. It's important that we have a collective approach, because the problems that we have were imposed on us by a collective enemy. That's the point that I'm making. And you don't have to say like, well, I don't believe in that Nkrumah's, Touréist, Cabralist. Well, you wouldn't know what it was if I put a gun to your head. So we're not talking about you having to adhere to our ideology, but we're just saying you need to understand the importance of collective revolutionary ideology. That is what will guide your actions and what you do as a human being. And it's also important to understand that once you adopt that type of revolutionary ideological foundation, it becomes so much easier for you to implement those types of principles. Because once you have a process where a collective of people are practicing these principles, it becomes much easier for you to advance those principles. So the example Shukura gave, where we are engaging with each other, and sometimes I get impatient because I don't like, people screwing around with my daughter. And, I tell her, well, you need to do this. And then, she's like, whoa, so we both practice patience with each other. We both practice it. And I'm saying where that comes from is not our just individualistic perspectives, but it comes from the fact that we both belong to this organization that constantly educates us about the necessity of valuing human life. And because of that, we have learned and continue to learn how to place a priority on listening, active listening, because that's how you value human life, really being present and doing the best you possibly can to be there for the people that mean something in your life. And even like she said, people you don't know. This comes from these principles that I'm talking to you all about. That's exactly where it doesn't come from anywhere else. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you're a Christian or you believe, you know people that are Christians and you think that that has merit, that's a beautiful thing. If you're a Muslim or you know Muslims and you believe that has merit, if you're Jewish or you know people that practice Judaism and you think that has merit, if you're Rastafarian and you know people and you think that has merit, I'm going to tell you right now, the belief we have in our revolution, I don't have any organized religion. I respect all of them as long as they're promoting people to do something to advance humanity. You can't be any of those religions and be pro-capitalist and expect to get respected by me. It's not going to happen. To me, you're just being a tool for the slave master. But my point is that nobody who believes any of those faiths has a stronger commitment to those faiths than we do to these revolutionary principles. And I'll bet my life on that. You ain't going to have no greater commitment to your belief in Jesus or Allah than I have to my belief in the principles of revolutionary Pan-Africanism. And the way I can prove that is if somebody came and wanted to harm somebody in a church that people in, most of us would do nothing. Because the first thing that we're concerned about is protecting our own life, which goes against all the so-called principles of the faith that you're supposed to commit your life to, 100%. Whereas I have, and plenty of witnesses to verify a number of instances where I have stepped up and placed my body and life on the line because of the principles that I believe in. There is no way in hell I can lay my head down at night and go to sleep knowing that I did not do what I could do to make justice come into this world. Even if I get killed, that to me is not as bad as having to sleep at night knowing that I was a coward and not willing to do what was necessary to stop a problem from infecting and affecting someone's life. And I know a lot, again, that's a lot for a lot of people, but that's because you ain't really serious about life. That's why we are serious about this stuff we're talking about. It's not just talk to us. We are serious about it. And the white supremacists and these people in the capitalist system, they know we're serious about it. They understand clearly that we're serious about it. So this is really the foundation of what we're talking about, you all. That's a lot. But it really, if you want this is what you're going to have to develop in order to make it come into existence, because it does create this commitment to collective ideology and practice. It does create greater capacity for you to engage more people in a positive way, because it's not just you individually, it's you're standing on the culture of African people, the history of African people. That's what revolutionary Pan-Africanist ideology is. And so you're not alone. You're not just going through this. You're not just being disrespected on an individual basis. You understand on a higher level why these things happen, so you don't have to necessarily personalize them to the same degree. And that gives you the foundation to have the wherewithal to work through it in a productive way that upholds your dignity at the same time. And it allows you to strengthen your relationships so that we can grow in our commitment and understanding about how to function together. In other words, what I'm saying, you all, is that if you seriously practice revolutionary ideology, then you will function on a higher level than most people. That's not an elitist statement. It's just a fact. It's an objective fact. There's no way you can sit here and tell me if someone is living their life based on principles of justice, they are not going to be functioning on a higher level than someone who's operating on a hustler mentality and just trying to see people as a means to an end. There's no way you can argue that. So that's why we're saying it's not elitist, because anyone could do this. It would be elitist if you're saying, well, I could do this and you can't do it. We understand these terms and what they mean. We're not functioning on these superficial levels of analysis. So elitist would be if we were saying, well, we have this and you can't have it because you're not us. No, anybody and everybody can operate with this level of understanding and practice of revolutionary principles. The only question we have is what's taking people so long to step in this ring and do it. And, setting the mode for what type of society we live. This is where being an individual comes in, because if all of us as individuals embrace collective consciousness, this begins to change the environment we exist in a more positive level. Just think about it. If more people were willing to be conscious of the needs of humanity and not just only their own individual needs, that would advance our collective society. No question about that. So creating a vision for these principles, how do we normalize parent-child sibling relationships beyond this backward, decadent empire capitalist system? And the way we do that is you have to just make a decision. I am not going to live my life based on how these people have dictated to me. I want to live it. And Shukura gave an example. Like, you could start with something small like your name and expand that to the things that you do, what you believe in, how you practice your life, what you speak out against, what kind of boundaries you have, what you will tolerate and what you won't tolerate, and how you engage that toleration. You don't have to go off on people, but you can tell people and make sure they understand. Like, my wife and I, we were at a campground this weekend, and the European was trying to talk to us about becoming members to the campground. And we talked to him very honestly. We're like, yeah, we're not interested in campgrounds where, they're flying all the damn Trump flags and blue lights. And we don't want to be around that, because it's going to be a problem with us. If somebody says something to us or tries to do something with us, we're not the kind of people that are going to call the police. You're going to be calling the police on us if that happens. We guarantee you that. So we told him, he looked at us like, oh my God. And I'm like, yeah, so that's why, probably not going to happen, because we're not interested in that. We'll go as we go and we'll figure out, the places where we want to go. We're not going to let nobody stop us from doing what we're going to do, but just knowing, having the confidence to know how to deal with people. I cannot claim credit for that on an individual level. It is the collective revolutionary principles that have been a part of my life on a most serious level for 40 years, you all. That's what has brought me to this place. And that's the reason why we don't have all the stresses and the problems and the issues that other people have, because we have something that works. And that's all we're saying. We just want to share it. That's all. So figuring out how to role model what healthy family relationships look like. We define that based on our Encrumis Terraeus Cabrales principles. We didn't define that based on capitalist TV or capitalist schools or capitalist jobs or capitalist institutions or colonial history. We gave all of that back to them. And we said, we're going to build this based on our revolutionary African personality principles. And that's why we're able to do the things we do. And it allows us to provide a healthy alternative to this backward system, because we definitely need that. We can't expect to have healthy family relationships, healthy relationships with our friends, when everything's based on this profit over people capitalist model. That is incongruent. The two things cannot exist at the same time. I don't care what you say. I run into people all the time. Well, I'm a revolutionary. And then next time I hear about them, they're involved in sexual assault, because people are trying to approach this from an individualistic level without any kind of organized process in their life. And that is not possible, my friends. It is not possible. And so we give people with principles hope. And then that's how we create a society. That's how this grows. This becomes a wildfire, because people see it and they begin to be inspired by it. And then they want to ensure that they're able to represent those same principles with their family and friends. And I know you all understand it. That's why you're here today, because you're hoping to hear something that can hopefully inspire you. And we're doing our absolute best to try to provide that to you. We hope that we can. But the point we're making is that we all can accomplish this. You don't need you don't need any college degrees. That's a bunch of BS anyway. Yeah, we got them. I got them for tactical purposes, because if once I tell people I have a master's degree and then I start talking about African Revolution, it has more credibility in their mind. That's a damn shame, but it's the truth because of how we've been conditioned. That is the only reason why I got the damn master's degree. I didn't understand what is a rebellious slave doing with a master's degree anyway. I had no interest in it. I just went there and did that because people said do it, because it'll help you in your organizing. And they were absolutely correct. And so that's why I did. I didn't do it for no damn job. So this is what we're talking about, is once we get in the position where we can use our skills and our principles, guided by our principles, then we can be in the position to inspire people. And that's the best contribution we can make to our oppressed African humanity, the best contribution. And so some important takeaways, right? Because, I've got the picture here of Ahmed Sekou Touré. And I said our ideology is Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Touré, and Amilcar Cabral, 3 African revolutionaries, 3 Pan-Africanist revolutionaries, 3 founders of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. No doubt about it. And this man here has some critical writings that are not really mostly available to people who speak English only, but you should try to study all that you can from Kwame Nkrumah, all that you can from Amilcar Cabral, all that you can from Sekou Touré. Because Sekou Touré, I just have him up there. I could have had all 3 of them. We don't elevate any of it above the other, but I had him up there because he has a number of writings on this topic that we're talking about, the revolutionary African personality, as do Cabral, as do Nkrumah. But I don't think that people in the West are as exposed to Sekou Touré because he didn't speak English, and most of his works have not been translated into English or Spanish, which are the 2 dominant languages here in the Western Hemisphere. So I want to just say, in relationship to takeaways, practice being genuine with your revolutionary life. That is critically important. And again, I don't think you can do that unless your revolutionary life is tied to revolutionary organization. You can't say, well, I'm a basketball player and you never play basketball with anybody. You just shoot baskets in your front yard. You're just someone that messes around with a basketball. A basketball player requires you to be a part of a team. It requires you to participate in competitions against other teams. That's the definition of a basketball player. So by the same token, you can't be a revolutionary if you're not involved in a revolutionary organization. That's the problem now. All these damn individuals, I'm a revolutionary, and then people look at how you act and what you do, and then that's why they don't want to have anything to do with revolution. Because at this stage, there's so many more people like you that's their definition of what a revolutionary is. And I know that hurts people's feelings. You need to have your feelings hurt because you're playing around with our people's suffering. And we need to move beyond that and get serious about fighting against this problem. So practice being genuine with your revolutionary life. If you're going to call yourself a revolutionary, then you got to be accountable to the requirements of being a revolutionary. You got to be in a revolutionary organization. You have to engage in constant political education. You have to engage in constant criticism, self-criticism. You have to do all these things that are painful to do, but are as the person that you need to be. So that's what you need to do. And then the next thing is, again, the constant political education, in engaging in self-criticism as a genuine, consistent practice. It's essential. You have to be willing to engage in struggle that reduces your ego and elevates your ability to be self-critical. If you're all egotistical and you can't take criticism and nobody can tell you nothing, you ain't a revolutionary. You ain't a revolutionary. You're a selfish, egotistical person. That's what you are. You got to, and nobody's perfect, but you got to be in a collective process that teaches you and helps you practice how to engage these things. That's essential. You want to get to this place, that's how you do it. It's not easy. There's no magic potion you can drink that makes you a conscious, humble revolutionary. You have to do the work. And that's the problem. Everybody wants to go to heaven. Nobody wants to die. Everybody wants to say they're revolutionary. Oh, I'm revolutionary. And then you don't do a damn thing to become a revolutionary. Then you're a fraud. You're a fake. And you're a danger to our people and to all of oppressed humanity, because you're standing in the way of us being able to make real progress. Essential. And all of that is to say that we have to learn how to live as honest a life as we possibly can at all times. Now, that does not say that you cannot make mistakes. We all are going to make mistakes. But what it is saying is that you have to be willing to acknowledge that was wrong. And I don't see a lot of that out here. You got to be willing to acknowledge that was wrong. When you go on Facebook and you talk about people in the movement, that's wrong. And you need to go back on Facebook and say, you know what? I was a damn fool yesterday. I shouldn't have done that. And then guess what? You don't need to do it ever again, because you're helping the police when you do that. I don't know what we got to do to get you all to understand that. I mean, it's like, this is like clearly, irrefutably, what so many of us are doing. So we have to engage in an honest life and deal with that ego. Put that ego down. That is not getting us where we need to do. And the way you do it is through these humbling, collective, revolutionary processes. And liberalism is the cancer for revolution. And by liberalism, we're not talking about the bourgeois definition that the capitalist system, well, you're a liberal or conservative. That's nonsense. We're talking about liberalism in the classical sense, where it means you do everything you can to avoid conflict. You're very liberal about conflict. You won't address it. Revolutionaries have to address conflict. Revolutionaries have to address uncomfortable situations. And that comes through training, ideological training. And that's done on a collective level. There's no way in hell you can accomplish that on an individual level. But if you don't do that on a collective level, then you'll be liberal. Well, I don't have to go to the meeting today. I don't have to read. Oh, that person, somebody said that they're torturing people. I don't want to get involved with that. This person is stealing money. I don't need to deal with that. I just like, these people are talking about the 4th of July and they invited me to the fireworks thing. I don't believe in that. I'm just going to go because I don't want to deal. Liberal. You're doing nothing to advance our struggle. In fact, you're a disgrace. We got to combat liberalism. That's what we got to do to move forward. And you only do that through the collective struggle. No question about that. And again, what Che Guevara said to us is that this struggle is about love. It's all about love. That's why that man, and you can say whatever you want because you don't know, you haven't studied anything about Che Guevara, so shut up talking about him, because we have. So when we talk, we're talking from a position of years of analysis and struggle and understanding and talking to his comrades and working with them. And you're talking from what somebody on TV told you. So shut the hell up. But when we talk about Che Guevara, we're talking about a man who, when he went out in the Cuban Revolution, he ran out in front of all the others to fight the backward Batista regime. He wasn't concerned about his own life. When he went to the Congo in Africa and fought for a year, he ran out in front of everybody else to fight. Everybody that knows anything about this man knows he did that. When he went to Bolivia, the reason why he lost his life is because he ran out in front of all of his combatants to fire the first bullets. He wasn't like these cowardly military commanders in this backward-ass country who sit behind a desk and never see any combat. Or they lie to you and tell you they did. Don't see any combat and send you on the front lines, send you on the front line. That was not who Che Guevara was. So this is because this man loved humanity and was willing to give his life for humanity. A lot of us will not understand that. I get that. But for those who can understand it, that's what we're talking about. And that's how we become the people we are. And we use, our families should be support mechanisms to do that. So we thank you all. Join us next Sunday, July 23rd. We're going to be revisiting African celebrity worship. Oh my goodness. This is a topic that never dies. These Negroes on here, coons and buffoons. We're going to be talking about this. And join the All African People's Revolutionary Party, APRP-INTL.org. Go to our APRP Forward Ever shop. The link is on the screen there. abetterworld.me. These videos are all there. Hood Communists, go there every Thursday and every day of the week for revolutionary African ideology. Support all of our programs that we have in the APRP, and buy my book and tell people about it, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. I need more materials to fight these fascists, so you buy a book, you're helping me buy more materials. Thank you all. Forward ever. We are winning. Don't let these people convince you we're not winning. Don't let them make you depressed. We are winning this struggle. Do not give up. Be encouraged. Forward ever, backwards never.